Yeah, I guess we could do discussion matters. Okay, so I will call the meeting then at 6:05. I don't have any adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any adjustments to the agenda? Before we get to audience and communications, thank you guys for the card and all of the well wishes last month. I think the only other time I have missed a board meeting is when my husband and I went to Bora Bora. And I gotta say, that was a better reason for missing the board meeting than breaking my leg. But thank you very much for the well wishes. Audience and communications. Any audience or communications? Okay, so we're gonna, Mike isn't here, so we're gonna come back to the presentation and we'll go right to discussion matters. 5.1 policy.
So it turns out it didn't get attached to the agenda, but we have a camera policy that is going to be coming before the board for discussion. We have cameras that are being installed in our buses and our schools. There'll be signs at all the buildings, there'll be signs on all the buses, and the policy discusses how we would use anything that we capture. I will send that out. I'm sorry it didn't get attached. It's my fault.
So we'll discuss it in February and approve it in March. We don't have any cameras on buses now?
We have no cameras on buses now. They're about to be installed.
Okay.
Just, actually it's interesting, we're putting buses, cameras not only on the inside, but on the stop arm. So now when people go past a bus with its red flashing lights on, we can take the picture, send it right to the police.
Nice.
So an awful lot of things about improving student safety going on right now.
Wow. That's good to know. 5.2 HRA update based on our conversation at the December board meeting. I asked Mark if he could update us on the.
So what we're talking about is the HRA, which I've talked about all this year, but cleaning up 2018, which continues. We are much further along than we were even in December. We still have employees who reach out who say, I think I'm missing some money, and we're still researching and getting them their money in most cases. Some of it's more complicated now because we're down to the nitty-gritty, but even I'd say I can't tell you how far along we actually are, but we're much further along than we were even 2 weeks ago. We have a 90-day run out on our year-end HRA, so we're still within that window as claims come in from December and that sort of thing. In 2019, we have changed the way our HRA works a little bit. First off, our company cut off all the old credit cards that we had given everybody for their FSA and HRAs and issued new ones. This was one way to start cutting off everything in 2018 and start fresh in 2019. The other big change is we are not using a model where, as we did in 2018, you'd go to the doctor and you'd get a check in the mail and then you'd pay your doctor with that check or after you cash it. Now it's going to our HRA vendor who's then paying the doctor directly. And then doing all their magic in the math and until your HRA is expended. We hope that model works even better. I will remind everybody that's kind of where we started last year with someone who said they could do that, but things seem to be working right now in the new way. So I will update again in February.
So do you think it's like 5% of the claims we still have issues with, or 40% or 2%?
Oh, no,
like,
what's much closer to 5 than even 20 at this point. But it's still hard. So I get a payment register every day that kind of shows what's going out. And what I don't have a clear window into is what people still have outstanding, because a lot of it has HIPAA protections around it. It's at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. But when people reach out to us, the problems we're seeing, it's funny, the problems we're seeing now are actually a little more complicated, which is good, because that means all the easy stuff's been fixed. And there was a lot of easy stuff that got fixed in November and December. I can tell you just in volume of email to myself and staff, which has started to fall off the table. What used to be 15 emails a day went down to 10, went down to 5. I got 1 today, which is worth celebrating. And we still are working through with people who have some problems, but
And they're all related to 2018.
they're
So
all
far
related
in
to
2019, it's clean.
the 2019 issues that have come up is someone didn't activate a card correctly, someone got a wrong card from Blue Cross and Blue Shield, stuff we can't, but that sort of thing. But yeah, no, nothing on this yet or ever.
Okay. I would just have to say that Mark and his team have done a phenomenal job of just working with people through what's very traumatic, I mean, when you have outstanding bills and you have creditors calling you, I mean, it's very traumatic, and Kelly and Sean have been doing a great job with Mark and handling all the calls and very patiently. It's, especially when it's affecting them too. I mean, this is the whole district. It's not just support staff, it's not just teachers, it's all of us, and everyone's impacted and everyone's struggling to make sure that it's hard enough to understand if you've ever tried to understand your own benefit statements and everything, and then so sometimes tempers are short, but they've been doing a great job, so kudos for that.
Thank you.
Barbara?
I know we had talked about adding a temporary resource to help with such calls. Does this mean that we won't, with a reduction in calls and needs, we don't need that resource?
Well, so I will remind the board that we're putting a half a human resource person into the budget for next year. That's not a temporary resource, but something that has been needed. But for right now, I'd say no, that's probably not necessary for that particular problem.
That was my question.
But let's not declare victory quite yet.
No, I'm not. That's why I was couching the whole way.
Yeah.
Until next month.
Until next month. It has been, and I would give credit to people who've called us and are understanding to my staff that it's not their fault necessarily, but people are frustrated. So, and I get it.
And the data path it's a annual contract, or is it?
It's an annual contract. So we signed with DataPath after future planning failed. So we signed with them in June till December, and then I signed with them for this full year.
Okay, January to December. Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back to 5.3, the legislative breakfast, because Mike Boardman is here. If he's ready to make the presentation, or do you start it, sir? Thank you.
Everyone's got a copy of the summary of the drawing.
A few others extras over here if I didn't get to everybody.
Yeah, anyone doesn't have one, they can have a copy there. So 2 minutes late, that was some tough traffic getting here. Wow.
Well,
Icy roads.
we're okay with that as long as it's okay with the fact that there's probably at least 4 more people who are also stuck
Also
on those
stuck in
roads that we're
traffic.
expecting tonight, so they'll be
Yeah.
walking in behind you, so.
Yeah, I didn't think that'd be a good idea if I got in an accident on the way.
No, it wouldn't be good at all.
This is management topic. If I ride with bandages on. So we'll just go through this, and again, for those that have been through this presentation in the past, it's a 10,000-foot level overview of all of our insurance other than health insurance. So this doesn't have anything to do with the health insurance. It's property, it's liability, it's workers' comp, it's auto, directors and officers protecting you. So we'll just go over the basic coverages that we have, and feel free to stop at any point to ask specific questions. We can do a question and answer at the end, but I think Jean said I have about 20 minutes, so we'll try to blow through this pretty quickly and leave any specific topics. There's always a few questions that people have at the end. So the first page is property coverage, which is pretty straightforward. It's insuring all of the property of Champlain Valley School District. You can see the buildings that we have listed there, but there's miscellaneous other property coverages as well. But in total, it's a blanket coverage of 141 million. So that covers for any one fire at any one building, we would have up to that amount. So we're not overly concerned about being underinsured, certainly from a property limit, because they blanket everything all together into one limit. Then we also have limited flood coverage, 2 million. We have earthquake of 10 million. And what we're trying to do there is just provide some coverage in the unlikely case that we had an earthquake that hit this building, or flood coverage, probably a little more likely, not necessarily this building, but certainly we have water issues there, so it potentially we could have a flood claim here.
A quick question.
Sure.
Flood claims include things like bursted pipes?
That's separate.
Okay.
You would have bursted pipes under the normal building coverage. Yes, good question. Then we have, coverage for all your computer coverage, which is a little bit different coverage because you got to cover things like electrical arcing, things that are just unique to computers. So all your big servers, things like that are covered under that 475,000. Then we have data breach coverage and emergency event coverage. And what that is, that's been added recently. Just some of these events you hear about on the news, if that happened at one of the schools here, we would have coverages for that. Things like counseling for employees that witnessed the event or students that witnessed the event. So that's all what this special event coverage is, which is sort of a unique coverage that unfortunately has been added and needed over the last 10 years because of some of the things you see on the news. And then we list here all the different buildings that we have limited coverage on this property policy. So I think that's pretty straightforward. We go on to the next page, we get into the crime coverage. So this is, when you read the newspapers, an employee stealing from a firm, that's what this is, blanket employee dishonesty. We have up to 400,000, so that would be an employee wrongfully stealing from the school district. And we also have just miscellaneous theft, disappearance. That's if someone breaks in, steals cash, checks, as well as computer fraud. Someone hacks into the computer and wires funds illegally. So that's the crime coverage. And then we get into the more, the higher limits where you really can't come up with an appropriate limit, I suppose, because the sky's the limit when you talk about liability. So this is bodily injury that's caused by somebody at the school district. That's the normal general liability. It's bodily injury. It's also property damage that's caused. So you have $1 million if you go down 3 lines or 4 lines, each occurrence. So for any one lawsuit, you have $1 million, and then you have another $10 million, what's called an umbrella that goes over everything. So that goes over your auto insurance, your general liability. So we usually give examples of a general liability would be a student walking in, I hate to use the bookcase example, but that's certainly an example that's happened here. When it hits the student, causes severe bodily injury due to negligence, and the school district gets sued. So that's your general liability. Someone walks into a basketball game, slips and falls on the floor. They allege that it wasn't cleaned, it wasn't mopped properly. So it's the public, it's a student, it's a vendor. Employees are covered by workers' comp, so that's not covered here by general liability. And then you have other miscellaneous coverages down here under liability. Incidental professional, you have nursing, counseling, athletic training, therapy. All of that's covered here by your general liability as well. Volunteers are covered, so if some of you are volunteering and you get sued for bodily injury you cause or property damage you cause.
So our new SRO, would that be covered under that category as well, or is that a separate?
It's a separate one. If you go down 3 more lines or 4 more lines, you have law enforcement professional liability. That covered.
And that's new this year, that wasn't there before?
True. Yes, we added that this year. Also, what's covered here is sexual misconduct, molestation, as well as student internship liability. So if a student intern gets sued while they're out working out at some of the senior programs, you know, the graduate programs, that would be covered here as well. And then we get into the next coverage. I don't know if anyone has questions on the general liability. Yes?
Just the reverse concept of the student internship liability. How about if a student is injured while out on an internship, where does that get covered?
Well, hopefully the students get medical insurance,
Their
health
own.
insurance. You know, there would have to be negligence on the school district for the school to provide coverage for that. You know, sometimes whoever they're doing their internship for, I know these interns, I mean, it's not quite as formalized as college internships, but, you know, it could be picked up by the place that they're doing the internship, if we want to call that. It could be picked up by their insurance, because they may have volunteer accident insurance as well. No. And I think, yeah, we do have some student accident coverage as well, and I don't know if we would put that on here. Yeah, that's not even part, we don't even put that in the summary of coverage. But it's very minor. You know, it's more, we did it, I think, more as a goodwill. If we needed something, we just felt we should provide something to the student. We do have some student accident coverage. Yeah.
Did you, Brendan?
I have a quick question. Sure. Considering that, you know, the data breach or some other cyber security stuff, what the liability could be depending what a hacker could find in a computer, are these limits? Like on the first page, your data breach, like what are your thoughts on that? It just seems like that's not a lot of coverage.
Probably the most, and we have two different coverages. If we look at the next topic, which is really the cyber liability, which is, that first line is data compromise, so that's third party. So that's if an outside entity sues the school district, and that's, you know, that's when someone's personal information gets stolen. So someone hacks into your computers and steals, so it could be your students' information, it could be some parents' information, it could be all your employees' information, because we've got social security numbers, you've got all of that information. So what this is going to pay for is all the notification costs. That's what's really expensive. Now the federal government requires you to provide all sorts of notification to anyone who possibly could have been breached. And that gets pretty expensive. I haven't seen more than 100,000 though. That's.
So what about the damages to a breach? Where does that fall?
Well, like if they had to do, you know, credit reporting and all that thing, when you say other damages, what are you referring to?
So, you know, say if, you know, like in healthcare, if health information is hacked into, it's like up to $1 million per occurrence that we could be fined or,
HIPAA
yeah, so is there anything in our environment like that that we would have to worry about with student data or other data that is housed in the school computer system?
I don't think of you having a lot of HIPAA work. I'm not sure if Megan, you keep much in terms of HIPAA.
Well, I mean, in the sense that some of what we have, we protect using FERPA laws, it sometimes includes information that is protected under HIPAA laws. I would also say our school social workers they need to comply with both.
Yeah.
So the answer is there is some
Yeah.
data. Electronically, it's probably mostly FERPA data. I think anything that falls into the HIPAA category is more likely to be in a locked filing cabinet somewhere.
Well, I'll look and see if you have specific HIPAA coverage for fines, is what you're talking about, not just the breach and the cost of notification.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a fine
Yep.
for HIPAA.
And maybe it's not HIPAA, maybe it's something else that is considered protected information within a school district.
Yeah.
But HIPAA is, and that's actually was where I was going. I know we had a conversation about social workers providing services in our schools,
Right.
and that has to be documented.
Yeah, they don't have, probably for those reasons, what they have to collect for their responsibility with the Howard Center, most of our social workers are contracted, isn't done electronically. And anything they do electronically is done through they're a contracted employee. So my guess, although I think it's a good question to ask, my sense is that the amount of electronic data at risk of or HIPAA data is pretty minimal, because what we have that falls under that isn't electronic.
Yeah. So what about just like if a social worker leaves, paper and with HIPAA information on it at a table, and another student finds it, takes a picture of it, and posts it to social media?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know they are obligated to keep their data safe in the same way that we're obligated to keep ours safe. So
they would essentially be liable for it underneath their contract?
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the violation is on them. In that instance, the violation is on them. The fact that it then landed electronically, I would think, isn't related to our, I'm pointing at my computer, but our programs not being sufficient to keep data private.
Yeah, Mark? It's a good question, though. I mean, HIPAA, you're right. HIPAA, you can be fined for HIPAA regardless of the electronic
Right.
cyber part of it. It's, you're supposed to sufficiently protect any private medical data in terms of HIPAA. But I'll look into that. I'll look into HIPAA specifically. I mean, this is protecting you for any cost you incurred due to a cyber breach.
Up to 100,000, right?
Up to 100,000. And I know, colleges and universities who I think have much more, maybe not necessarily, I think of them having more medical records, because they often have, a health department where people are going for regular visits, things like that. But they do have higher limits, but not a lot higher. I mean, they go up to maybe 250,000. And again, the highest I've seen is 90,000 for a cyber breach. And that was all primarily notification cost. You also get into PR costs. You sometimes do, you want to get it out to the public that we've secured our data. This isn't going to happen again, so they'll pay for that expense as well. But yeah, Gene and I will look into that specifically for HIPAA, because if it's not on this cyber coverage, it may be on the directors and officers, is where we often see specifically fines for HIPAA violations. Because that's less, it is less of a cyber thing. It's a breach of confidentiality is really what that is.
Well, and Brendan, to your point, where we would have that is school nurses. So when you said health professionals, that would be a place where there's medical data. I don't know that we have an electronic tracking system other than, they might have a Google Doc, they have email. But we don't have like a data system the way we have a data management system for special ed. We don't have one formally for nurses, but it's a good question.
Well, and doesn't, like at the high school level, when you play a sport, you have to get a physical, and that has to be submitted. I don't know who keeps that, if that's the coaches or the athletic director.
Right, well, there's hard files. That's also part of what prompted the whole student data privacy consortium that we're now part of. So you're asking an insurance question. It's also important to remember that that prompted an entire process that now safeguards our data in a way that, or at least makes sure that the vendors we use safeguard the data in a way that would prevent, hopefully.
Like if we hit those limits on the cyber, wouldn't our umbrella coverage kick in?
Yeah, the umbrella does not go over the cyber.
Doesn't cover the cyber.
It doesn't. It does, yeah, it doesn't. You do have higher educators' legal liability limit's $1 million there. So that's why I want to check the HIPAA. If there is some coverage provided there specifically for HIPAA, there's usually a sublimit of some sort. So my thought is, if we're going to find it, I'm thinking we may find it in the directors and officers, which is educators' legal liability coverage. Because that's an exposure all schools have. So I, as I'm thinking about this, it's got to be in here somewhere. I just don't have it broken out here in limit.
So I had a somewhat similar question about if there was, in terms of if the limit is high enough, if there was a catastrophic incident where someone was injured through some fault through the school system, whatever that might be, from another staff person, however, and it caused lifelong disability or even death, if I'm understanding this correctly, is $1 million the limit?
Well, if we go to the next page, which is where we're headed, the excess liability provides us another $10 million. So that's why I was saying we have, in total, we have $11 million for your catastrophic claims, which are bodily injury caused to a student. It's auto liability, where you've got a bus with several kids on it. So you do have $11 million per claim for that. So it would be pretty catastrophic to exceed 11 million.
And so per claim means if there was another incident 2 months later or whatever, there is yet again another potentially $11 million in coverage for that incident as well? Is it per incident?
Well, we have an aggregate limit as well. So we have, if we go back to the general liability, we have a general aggregate limit of $3 million on your general liability. And then you have $10 million on the excess. So in aggregate, you have $13 million for multiple claims in one policy year. And you have $11 million for one claim. So that's a good question, because there is a difference. So easiest way to think of this, you have $11 million for any one claim. If you have several claims, you have up to $13 million. And this is just for the indemnity coverage. You have unlimited defense coverage, which is where a lot of the cost is your legal costs to defend yourself. So this 11 million per incident that we're talking about is just to pay for the student's medical or whoever it is that incurred severe bodily injury. So that gives you a little more comfort that it's, if it's a catastrophic claim, what often happens, and that's why you see settlements happening, they just don't want to go through all the defense because they're going to end up spending all of that anyways. But 11 million's, that's a pretty good limit.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen some wrongful deaths in Vermont. And even those are settled, I've seen, 5 million. So that's a good question, though.
Thank you.
We probably should put that limit, because that question comes up anytime you're going through this. It's like, that's all we have for limit, and then the excess is afterwards. But, okay, so we'll go to the last page. I should number these pages, but is it the last page? Second to last page, I guess. Here we have the educators' legal. So this is protecting the board. It's protecting all the professionals, the teachers, if they get sued for wrongful teaching. Parent sues because they don't feel their student received proper education. This is where that would be covered as well. And again, you have $1 million of coverage there. And then that excess goes over that as well. So you have $11 million for any of these directors and officers coverages. Educators legal. And then you also have what's called employment practice liability. So that's a wrongful termination. It's discrimination in the workplace. It's discrimination in your hiring practices. If you don't hire someone and they come back after the school district. So you have $1 million for the employment practice liability. And you also have that excess $10 million that goes over that as well. Okay, then we'll go to the last page here, which is commercial auto, which is pretty straightforward. It's covering all the buses. We have a few private passenger vehicles as well. So you have $1 million for any one accident, and then you also have that 10 million excess that goes over this. So for any one accident, we have $11 million. And then the last section, we talk a little bit about the workers' comp. The workers' comp, the limits are all statutory. It's all required by the state of Vermont, the limits. And we list here sort of, we go through our claim experience, and which results in an experience mod. And you can see these are our total losses. So that's your total amount of workers' comp that's paid for employees' injuries and for their lost wages while they're injured. You know, the good news, 17-18 last year, we had, it was a good year. It renews, our policy goes July to July, so that's why it says 17 to 18. And we had $104,000, and believe it or not, that's a good year. That is a good year. So far this year, we've had approximately 19,000. But again, it's now coming into February, and still, knock on wood, it's been a good year as well. And it's very important. It's, you know, why Mark and HR, we spend a lot of time managing the workers' comp claims, but also trying to prevent these claims because it's expensive coverage. Yes?
Could you explain the mod rating a little bit? I'm like kind of looking at 13-14 compared to 14-15, where it's 0.7, 0.73, but they're very different losses.
Yeah, because
what is that rating? And
yeah, the experience mod is based on 3 years of loss info, not including the most recent year because it's not completed yet, and your claims. So you got to go back. Like if you look at 18-19, that experience mod of 0.99 is taking into effect 14-15, 15-16, and 16-17 losses. So it's those 3 years worth of losses generates that experience mod of 0.99 in 18-19.
And lower the mod, the better
Yeah.
you are.
So the average is a 1 for every industry. So if basically experience mod is what it's projected with your payroll, you should have this amount of losses. So that's the denominator, and then the numerator is your actual losses. So if you have less than what's expected, you have below 1. And as you can see, yeah, we've always been below 1, so you're better than average. So it's flipped up in the past few years because we had some tough years back in 14, 15, and then 16, 17. We had some tough incidences that have hit our experience mod. But the good news is you're still getting you're getting a 1% credit this year on your premium because it's below 1. So the goal next year, we're hoping that's going to come down probably to a 0.96. So we're going to save, you know, 6% on the premium because our experience is trending better. So we spend a lot of time on the workers' comp piece of this, trying to prevent claims, and then when a claim occurs, trying to manage the claim. It's an expensive premium part of the whole puzzle here.
So our workers' comp provider has come in and walks through the school buildings and talks to our facilities folks about what could potentially be improved. And he came in this year and spoke to the principals because it's not all about the facilities. Sometimes it's about bad behavior. So it was they're very proactive in helping us keep that rate down.
And we wanted to raise just awareness because principals have so much going on in their day that these things, you know, especially when you're there every day, you're not thinking about things, cords and things that can lead to claims. So we sort of go through the things that have caused claims, just so they're aware of it. You know, we go through and say, okay, this past year we had 5 of these type claims. You know, it could be slip and fall due to ice. It's, you know, there's a lot of different reasons for the claims, but we go through what's causing the claims, just so they're aware of it, so that when they see something, they're thinking about it. We thought that was important, just to increase the general awareness. But it's good. It's trended well. And we moved the insurance this year on everything other than the workers' comp. We moved it from Hanover, who was on it a year ago. We moved it this year to Liberty Mutual. We did that for a variety of reasons, but we do shop it on a regular basis to make sure we're getting the best price, the best coverage, and other services too. That came up in this situation, that the school district preferred a service that was provided by Liberty that wasn't provided by Hanover, so that's why we ended up moving it to Liberty Mutual. Does anyone have any questions? That's a 60 or 20-minute overview of something that's not terribly exciting. Thanks for everything.
All set?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
coming.
Glad to
Thanks.
present
Thank you
it.
for
I know
risking
you got
your
a lot
life
of
to come.
important things going on. Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Mike.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.
Okay, welcome again, everybody. I feel like I need to say that welcome again. Dave, do you want to? Are you going to spend the time in the audience, or you're coming up?
It's for board
It's
appreciation
preventative.
month.
I like that.
We'll pass them down.
There.
Who's the neediest?
Okay, so we kind of rearranged a few things to fill some time. So we actually already did 5.1 and 5.2, and we're on to 5.3 legislative breakfast under discussion matters. The legislative breakfast this year is on March 25th. It's a Monday. It's at 7:30 in the CVU library. And I think I put out a email. I might have done it when I had just gotten back from the hospital, so I'm not sure it was coherent. But I think I asked if people were interested in volunteering to help plan that. And Barbara has gotten back to me, and we're happy to have other people, seeing as neither Barbara nor I have ever done this before. But my thought was, usually at the breakfast what we do is we talk about areas that the legislature is looking at for the coming year, any type of legislation that we want to have input on, or topics of interest that we would like to express our opinions on. And I feel like it's kind of slow this year getting out of the gate since it's the beginning of the biennium. But one thought was to put up a Google Doc, and if people had ideas of what they wanted to talk about, Barbara and I could then sift through them, probably with Elaine, and pick one or two, maybe three. I feel like we start on a topic and it goes and goes and goes and goes. It's hard to do multiple areas. But if there are areas that people were interested in, I don't know, maybe like a proposed 4-district state, or whether some districts should or shouldn't be consolidated under Act 46, or the new special education legislation.
Or see what comes up.
Yeah.
In Davis, I mean, a number of us have helped facilitate these in the past. Maybe we could share past agendas.
Well, I think there's always that part where the legislators show up and one or two of them give a 10-minute talk on what they're doing. And I think that's also part that's sort of unscripted. I feel like I remember that always as kind of the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Or they have an issue that they're looking for feedback from us.
And I think the governor's budget speech is Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll
Something
know
will
what we
come
need
up.
to talk about on Thursday afternoon. So
One year we did I remember doing a presentation on when they tell us that we have the control over the taxes.
Right.
And I remember putting up all the different scenarios of what our tax rate could be based on things we had no control over.
Yeah.
So I think I think you're right, it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
But if anyone has a burning desire or burning issue, I mean, I think that would be important to address as well.
I think it's been really helpful just to have a conversation, and we'll have so much more information about our own budget and feedback from the community by then, and they'll have so much information about what they're dealing with, and keeping it a little bit loose at this point, I think, is really helpful.
and the invite.
But as long as we have people that know that that's going to happen, they have it on their calendars and they're
Right.
coming.
Right.
Did we send out invites as well?
I
right?
think the update from Kate Webb would be especially,
Yeah,
she's chair of the education committee, like her,
yeah.
her information about, you know, what they're working on is probably gonna be the most useful to us.
Just, you know, if you have free time, like if you're just hanging out in bed with your leg up, not doing anything, you can always go online, and the House Ed and Senate Ed lists their agenda every week, and all of the documents that are provided, like I noticed our Megan Roy perhaps was there today presenting, and that is a wealth, I'm telling you, it's great reading if you're just hanging out, so feel free to.
Keeping you out of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. No binge watching for me. Okay, so March 25th, 7:30 a.m. We'll move on to action matters. 6.1, do I have a motion to adopt the final budget?
Second.
Discussion.
So I handed out this package here. There's no change to the expense, the spending, or the revenue. In fact, the only number that has changed in the right direction, which is that the state is still not final on their equalized pupil calculations, but they're up to version 7, and as of version 7, we picked up 15 equalized pupils.
Between 1 and 7.
Between version 1 and version 7, yes. About 3 of those were real kids, and the rest is just the calculation. So, actually, kudos to.
All those fractional kids.
Well, they're into hundredths here. So, so I updated the ones. If you look on these sheets, you'll see. Well, just like I tried to put in italics, like the very bottom here, it's got a little note that says unchanged from the board review. I didn't want you to spend too much time, but now you have the whole thing. So, if you get to the pre-CLA tax rate page, the equalized pupil count at the very top is. Very top number there is 4143, and it used to be 4128, and that, you know, flows through to change the other numbers. So our cost per equalized pupil is only up 2%, was 2.5 before, so that's good news for taxpayers. It translated into about a penny reduction on rounding, about a penny reduction on everyone's tax rate. Williston's the only one that didn't seem to. Must not have rounded enough to go down, but everyone else, the tax rate, for instance, Charlotte is now $1.48, it was $1.49. So, good news for taxpayers, and.
Jean, the net equalized pupil spending at 16,000, where does that fall? Do you have any sense of where that falls statewide?
We're roughly in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of adopting the final budget as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Do I have a motion to approve the articles and warning?
So moved.
Second? Discussion.
All the numbers here are as we've been reviewing them. We dropped, last, if you compare to last year's warning, there was one article at the annual meeting that involved setting up a fund that was a one-time thing, so that one's not on here. And then, of course, last year we had the ballot question about reusing the money that was from the Shelburne project, and we don't have that one. So we have a couple less, but otherwise these are sort of our standard articles. Oh, I did want to point out the Article 9, the last one there. We worked through the buses that we want to replace. I think I told you 6 buses before. The ones that we are replacing are our bigger buses. So in order to keep it around the $500,000 mark, we dropped it to 5 buses, but we're getting 90 passenger buses, most of them. And before Russ jumps in, I would like to say that, yes, they have seatbelts. So, we do buy, we buy our buses with seatbelts. I think we have been for a couple of years, So sort of the next hurdle is the cultural change to make sure the kids are using them, but yes, we do have seatbelts on the buses now.
Any other questions around the articles in warning?
I always just wish there was like a line break between each of the compound sentences in each article so that you knew, why are we talking about 16,000 versus 78,000? I'm sure there's a reason why we.
78 million.
Well, that is statutory.
Well, I know you have to put those things in there,
Yeah,
but it would be
yeah.
nice if it was broken into a separate paragraph.
I would like it if I just didn't have to spell out all the dollars with words.
All right, all those in favor of approving the articles in warning signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 6.3, do I have a motion to approve the announced tuitions? Second? Discussion? I'm gonna say this again as I said last year. Equalized pupils, they weight high school kids more because they say it costs more to educate them. And yet our tuition for our high school is lower than our younger kids. Why does that,
We do a bang-up job of being very efficient at the high school. It's the biggest school. I mean, maybe size has a little bit to do with it, but obviously they're doing something right.
They do such a good job in the elementary schools that
There you go.
Yeah, they don't have to.
All around, the system is working.
all right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next meeting dates, February 5th, back here, 6 PM, committee meetings. February 19th, regular meetings. And I think that is it. So now I will ask for a motion to go into.
Before you do that, could I take a minute?
Yeah.
So this year, we got notice from the Vermont School Boards Association that this is Board Appreciation Month. I have no idea if this has been going on forever, and just this year, they let us know. But we want you to know that forever, we have appreciated the work that you do. Your leadership makes our work possible and makes for a great educational system, and we are very grateful. We have a little cake there. I hope you'll take a little piece of it before you leave. And we have just a couple little things we want to give you, and really these are little teeny tiny things.
Oh.
This will remind you of the good work you do. You can put it in your pocket or
Oh,
Oh, that's
On
so
your desk.
sweet.
I
Hand
could
to heart.
use, yeah.
Heart to heart, heart to heart.
you were hoping for a Tootsie Roll Pop.
a swag bag.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I love that. I have a place where I can put that too.
I got it like the little.
Well, exactly, I have a zipper cart. Well, it's my little guardian angel I have in there too.
They're like $30.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What was that?
That's great.
Show this to student council. Yeah.
I also love jam. They're pretty old.
I didn't get one. That's okay.
No, we are the only ones that meet.
All right. So can I have a motion to go, I have to text my ride that we're almost done. Can I have a motion to go into executive session for evaluation and negotiations? Second? All right.